And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Friday, August 2nd. And this outlook will be for the weekend, Saturday and on Sunday. And as of this Friday, we do have a stalled out cold front here in the central interior. This front will begin to wash out and then actually lift back northward as a push of milder air comes in actually off of the Bering Sea, and a ridge of high pressure, stronger ridge of high pressure builds up here into the Gulf, up into the south, central, southeast interior along the Alcan border, extending eventually eastward by early next week into the Panhandle. So we still have some areas of rain and gusty winds in the central interior on this Friday morning and afternoon, but to the west is where the real action will be. Low pressure out over the Bering Sea will keep southerly flow, moist southerly flow. It'll include areas of moderate to even locally heavy rains at times over the weekend, and southeast to south, at least surface winds and flow aloft that is going to keep that moisture riding northward along the west coast. So we're going to see intervals, larger areas of IFR conditions around Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula. As we go further east with the ridge in place, more in the way of VFR conditions over the Panhandle and along the Alcan border. In fact, temperatures are going to be warming here through the course of the weekend, and especially early next week. We're looking at high temperatures back up maybe around or above 80 degrees in areas, the normally warm spots like Eagle on up to Fort Yukon and Northway, as well as warming temperatures into the 70s across areas of the Panhandle. So for Saturday afternoon, again, we find IFR conditions out over the Bering Sea and along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula with this southeast to south flow. And as we get into the day on Sunday, we still have IFR conditions out over the Bering and down here along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula. Areas around Wood-Tikchik region, as well as along the spine here and south slopes of the Brooks Range for Sunday morning. IFR conditions could be located there. And Sunday afternoon, a continuation of IFR conditions bearing straight down out over the Bering Sea and then out over the Aleutians and along especially the south side of Kodiak Island, south and east side, as well as south side of the Alaska Peninsula, because we're going to have areas of rain and gusty winds continuing this weekend along areas of the west coast, whereas drier conditions on Sunday. Sunday will be a beautiful day across much of the Alaska Range, central eastern interior along the Alcan border and the Panhandle with warming temperatures, many areas seeing temperatures 70 plus as a result. So for Anaktuvuk Pass on Saturday, it could become IFR there as we go through the day. MVFR, VFR briefly, very, very early morning. Otherwise, a trend MVFR to even IFR. Atigun Pass, generally MVFR conditions are expected, could be a brief interval of VFR very early Saturday. And then Lake Clark and Merrill, generally MVFR conditions to start early Saturday morning, giving way to VFR. Same thing, Rainy Pass, MVFR conditions giving way to VFR conditions. Windy Pass, though, in the central Alaska Range may tend to hold on to MVFR conditions, as will Isabel Pass. Further east, though, looking at VFR conditions as cloud cover, lower cloud cover would be minimal if non-existent. And then Tanita Pass generally should see VFR conditions as you go down across the Copper River Basin. And then Portage Pass will see MVFR conditions Saturday morning along the eastern portion of the pass and out over Prince William Sound. But overall, the pass should become VFR later morning and for the afternoon. And then Chilkoot and White enjoying VFR conditions, as will much of the Panhandle this coming weekend. Looking at the freezing levels aloft, we've seen freezing levels come up considerably here over the Bering Sea. Freezing levels aloft are upwards around and over 14,000 feet to central Bering, around St. Matthew, St. Paul, extending back through the central Aleutians, and also another little bump coming up south of the Alaska Peninsula. We have a warmer feed of moist air coming in off the Bering and out of the North Pacific. That's why this area of the west coast is going to see intervals of rain and windier conditions through the weekend and actually on and off all of the upcoming week. So freezing levels across the interior are generally around and above 6,000 feet north of the Alaska Range, kind of between the Alaska Range and the Brooks Range. And looking at the greatest threat for icing, and it's pretty high given the high freezing levels. You have to go up above 10,000 feet here across the central western interior along the west coast as a result of that frontal boundary that's it's stalled right now. It's going to try to lift back north. And with an area of rain on Saturday, we'll be pushing northward up there in the, as I said, the middle lower Yukon Delta in areas south of the Brooks Range and northwest of the Alaska Range. Further west, there is some precipitation out toward the central western Aleutians, but freezing levels aloft are above 15,000 feet, very high. And looking out at the jet stream for Saturday, we have troughiness here over eastern Russia. Core of winds 100 to 125 knots off the Kamchatka coast out into the western, trying to push into the central Bering, and then we have another area of northwest winds to 90 knots, a little jet core out over northwest Canada. Otherwise, winds relatively light out over the Gulf, and at least as we get down to the mid-levels, though, we find the area of low pressure that's going to be out here toward the coastline here of eastern Russia, Kamchatka, as well as the western Bering. This is allowing for stronger southwesterly flow over the mainland, anywhere from 35 to 45 knots here, lower Yukon area. And then south of the Alaska Peninsula, winds 40 to 50 knots, feeding moisture northward. And that'll be the trend into early next week. There's going to be another impulse, a low pressure, an area of moisture, and stronger winds rotate back on up across the southwest, the Alaska Peninsula, southwest coast and interior, and that's going to lift northward. So the pattern stays active beyond this weekend. And for Saturday, 3,000 feet, you can see this core of winds anywhere from 35 to as high as 50 knots out over Norton Sound, lower Yukon Delta, south-southwest winds, so we expect turbulence to be widespread there. Also a core of 50-knot winds south of Kodiak Island and just south there of the Alaska Peninsula. So as a result, widespread moderate turbulence over the west side of the state, especially along the south slopes of the Brooks Range, the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence, the lower, even up into the middle Yukon, lower middle Kuskokwim. There could even be some isolated spots of severe turbulence. And then also we have areas of moderate turbulence here extending out along the Alaska Peninsula, surface to 4,000 feet, and then an area way out toward the western Aleutians from the surface to 3,000 feet.